Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, we're taking a look at the best decks with which to climb in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and specifically what decks are going to be the best for you to get to the highest ranks as possible, as quickly as possible. And yeah, we're just gonna quickly go through this, just starting off here with Tier 1, which is likely to get you to Master 1 pretty effectively, the best with which to climb. Yeah, not necessarily the highest win percentage, but just like what overall is going to do the best. Tier 2 is very solid, can easily get you to Master 1, but a step down from those top tier or Tier 1 decks. Tier 3 is you're going to struggle to get to Master 1, but realistically you could do, or you can do it. It's not like the most difficult, and it's more about dedication. Rogue is like, if you have brain damage and really just only wants to play Yu-Gi-Oh! At any point ever, then you can get to Master 1. And then, of course, everything else is everything else. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying, as of right now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel is in a point where everything is really balanced. Now, what I mean by this is that not everything is good, but everything is comparable enough to everything else, because there is so much unbelievable garbage that you can accomplish with pretty much every single deck that it doesn't really matter as much what deck you're playing, but how many decks or how many games you are playing. So do keep that in mind. If you want to climb, it is sheerly quantity over quality, especially right now. Let's hop in, starting with VW. VW is not very good. There's not really a reason to play VW. It's inconsistent, it's bricky, it doesn't play the game like 90% of the time, and it's terrible going second. Next up we have Branded. Branded I'm going to put into Tier 3. Even with the new released cards, I really don't see this deck actually accomplishing a whole lot in terms of climbing. Yes, you can absolutely climb, but you do have to put an insane amount of games into it, because this deck just kind of doesn't do stuff half the time, and half the time it does absolutely everything that you could ever want. And also, you really need to put in an insane amount of games, and they're long games, and they're not fun games most of the time. So yeah, there you go. It's just like a struggle to actually climb with this. I don't think it's bad. I think its win rate will be pretty decent, but like actually playing the game will be a pain because you're playing Branded. So there you go. Next up we have Punk. Punk I'm also going to put into Tier 3. I think is fine. Just plays the game, and sometimes does a stupid, unreasonable combo that ends on 9 interactions and 4 additional cards in hand, and sometimes it does nothing because it dies to a single Ash Blossom. What can you do? Next up we have Blue Eyes, which yeah, it's still Tier 1. Mostly the Primite stuff is the reason for this to be as high as it is. Being able to like normal summon a barrel and then still do the entire Blue Eyes combo off of it is kind of stupid. And Drill Beam is maybe one of the most busted cards ever. Next up we have White Forest, which I also think is Tier 1. I'm not going to rank these in the tiers because at this point I don't care. I don't think it matters realistically. But yeah, White Forest is up there. White Forest is very strong and is comparable in nature to pretty much everything. Mostly due to the fact that the end board is just so insane that if you don't, if you allow almost anything to resolve, it just kind of kills you. It also has like plays through Maxi, which some other decks don't really have, which is notable. Next up, we have Melodious. Melodious is Rogue. It's fine. It's decent. It does stuff. It has a very solid end board. And I'm more specifically talking just like Melodious as a deck, not as an engine. Melodious as an engine, I still think is fairly underrepresented, but yeah, it's fine. Dragon Link is pretty good as well. It's similar in nature, in my mind, to that of Punk, but why would you play Dragon Link when you could just play Punk? It does the exact same thing, and more or less accomplishes similar stuff. It can also die to just Ash Blossom. The biggest benefit to playing something like Dragon Link as opposed to Punk is Bestials, but that's it. Next up, Chimera. Chimera I'm going to put into Rogue. Chimera, again, not a bad deck, just a bad deck for climbing. Reason being, you have to play a bunch of games that are just kind of like solely brick fests from both players, and then you can kind of get there, and it's just not I would imagine it's not a fun experience, but maybe you're enjoying it. But yeah, it feels like a deck where either you have everything and your opponent can't do anything, or you have nothing and any interaction immediately kicks you to the curb. So, there you go. Next up, we have Mermail. Mermail I'm going to put into Tier 2. Yeah, we're going to put this into Tier 2, mostly for the fact that going second, you actually can play through some of the boards sometimes, and your turn 1 is probably just going to get people to immediately scoop, so it's going to be fairly decent. However, oftentimes you will also just immediately die to, like, Maxi or Droll or the myriad of other things that are available in this game, so... And even, like, going second isn't a guarantee. Next up, we have Ritual Beast, which I think is fairly decent as well, but not insane, and is another combo deck that dies to pretty much everything under the sun, similar in nature to that of Punk or Dragon Link. Multi-Faker is not what it used to be. Altergeist basically does the same thing as a bunch of other combo decks now, like Trap Trick or what have you, and is just not good. Same thing with... Well, okay, not same thing, but... the Shining Sark, that's what it's called. Shining Sark is an archetype that does in fact exist and is not very good. That's it. I have nothing to say to this. Galaxy, or Tachyon in particular, the Tachyon counter trap is very, very powerful and is worth playing genuinely. Like, it's one of the reasons to actually play Tachyon. But that being said, no, this deck is too inconsistent, and even the counter trap itself is not enough to actually win you games sometimes, because that's pretty much your only interaction. So yeah, sometimes you immediately win the game off of it, and sometimes it does nothing. And it just didn't matter, because your opponent just has all of the extenders. Like if they're playing, I don't know, Fiendsmith Snake Eye or something like that. Infernoble has maybe one of the strongest end boards of all time, and is genuinely a almost surefire if you actually get to do the combo, but sometimes you have to go second. So there you go. Dino just loses to itself. I really can't put this much higher than everything else. Dino losing to itself and also being a combo deck and also dying to pretty much everything else under the sun and bricking, and yeah, I don't know, maybe it's good, but I rarely see this deck, and whenever I do, it just dies to like one interaction. It's tragic. Next up, Adamantipator. Adamantipator is fairly decent because of Block Dragon, but is kind of just another one of the combo decks that does the combo deck thing. True Draco is a deck that sometimes floodgates the opponents and sometimes wins. Next up, Lightsworn. Lightsworn is mostly played with Tier, but even if it's not played with Tier, it's still not good. Yes, it is an FTK, but also, if you don't FTK, you do die. And Tier Element is not enough to allow the Lightsworn stuff to actually play through established boards. Like, it's either just worse Tier Element, or, like, not capable of playing through the end boards, depending on what version of the deck you're playing. So yeah, like, just going second is kind of just a death sentence. There's not really enough non-engine that you have available to you. Hero. Hero is the definition of rogue and will forever be rogue. It is never not going to be rogue. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Dragon Maid, not very good, unless you're playing it with, like, Dragon Link stuff. Next up, we have Sword Soul, which is also just not very good. I don't know. Every time I see this deck, it just does, like, absolutely nothing unless they draw Godlike. And even if they draw Godlike, I still feel like this deck doesn't do anything. But I could be wrong. It's very susceptible to pretty much any form of interaction right now. It's not good into Maxi, it's not good into Fualos, it's not good into Droll. Well, Droll maybe. It's not great into Nib, but, like, it can play under Nib. It's not great into, like, you know, Imperm or a bunch of other stuff. And also, it just dies to itself. That being said, I still don't think it's... we'll put it in rogue. Infernoid. Infernoid is a deck that does exist and is okay, because sometimes you can high roll and just end on, like, an insane board because you hit just really, really well with Reasoning or Monster Gate or Grass or something else along those lines. And sometimes you draw Infernoids and you lose. Sky Striker. Sky Striker, unless you are playing the Tenpai cards, is not very good, because you're basically forcing the opponents to go first, which is not very good in the current metagame, because there are so many ways to just immediately invalidate everything that you are doing. And I genuinely mean this. Mermail does exist. It is a deck. Next up, Mathmech. Mathmech is a combo deck that does combo deck things. Next up, Yubel. Yubel I'm actually going to put... that's too high. I'm going to put it into Tier 2. And the reason for this is because it is one of the better combo decks, because its combo is so insanely powerful, similar in nature to, like, the White Forest stuff. Its biggest problem is like going second, right? It can go second, and it can really easily cheese wins, which is why I'm putting it in tier 2. But it doesn't have the same capability of like going second as like White Forest does. I think White Forest breaks boards a little bit more efficiently, just due to the fact that pretty much every single one of the cards needs to be answered in White Forest. But then on top of that, there's like White Forest has more like non-engine, such as like Droplet or Triple Tack, which are fairly decent right now. Whereas Duel doesn't really have that as much. I think there's a lot more bricks that you have to play in that deck. But yeah, it's comparable in nature to White Forest, but I do think it's weaker to a lot of the common hand traps. Droll, Fulos, Maxi, even like Nibiru can be kind of bad for the deck. So there's that. Next up, Tier Element, I'm going to put in tier 2 as well. I think Tier Element is fairly solid with the Fiendsmith stuff. It makes it a little bit better. It's not insane, but it does Tier Element things, and you know, it's Tier Element. Next up, Vanquish Soul is Rogue. It's fine. It does Vanquish Soul stuff, which is bouncing and tagging out and all of that stuff. It's a fun deck to play, but it's not necessarily a good deck to play. Same thing with Pearly. Pearly still doesn't have access to its entire engine, which is kind of silly because it's absolutely a-okay. I think even if it were to receive all of its engine, it really wouldn't be that impactful. I saw a bunch of people playing it last season, but that being said, I still don't think it's exceptional. It's fairly decent because like you get to draw a bunch of cards and you can see like big haymakers or just a myriad of interactions, and then you just have a big guy that your opponent has to deal with. That being said, it could also just absolutely die to Ash Blossom or Droll or anything really. So, yeah, almost anything can just kill it. Yes, you could draw hands that, like, do stuff, especially with the Ghost Trick stuff, but even then, like, you know, Utopic just isn't enough nowadays. Stun is fine. Next up, Sprite, I actually think is pretty solid, just for climbing in general, mostly due to the fact that Sprite has the ability to play a bunch of hand traps, has the ability to play almost any hand trap as well. So if a hand trap happens to be good, you can play that. And then it also just has one of the most easily... like, it has a way to basically pivot through almost anything. And no one's, like, just immediately firing Maxi. They should, but no one is. And so because of that, like, Sprite gets better, because no one's like, oh, I'm gonna immediately fire Maxi. It's like, no, they're just gonna hold it, and then you get to do your special summons, which is very funny. But yeah, overall, on top of that, it's just, it plays a lot of hand traps / non-engine, but it also has the ability to play through a lot of hand traps / non-engine. So I think it's pretty good. I might be overrating this, but it also did just receive a big buff. So there's that. Next up, Lab. Lab is also a tier 2 deck. It's very solid. It's one of the few control decks. It plays on a different axis than pretty much everything else. It can go second, but it's very good going first. Like, it's extremely good going first, which is its big boon. There you go. Runic. Runic is basically just... actually, most Runic decks outside of Stun Runic, which I think Stun Runic is just objectively worse Runic, or objectively worse Stun. But most Runic decks aren't great because Runic is so heavily nerfed, so I honestly think I'm going to put this in Rogue. Just like every deck that plays Runic is just actively shooting itself in the foot right now, so there's that. Valence is a deck that, you know, it can FTK you, but it could also do absolutely nothing, and it dies to, like, everything, so there's that. I guess it doesn't die to, like, Imperm, so there's that. And technically speaking, it wouldn't die to, like, Bestials, but I don't know. I've so rarely seen this deck do anything. Either it does absolutely everything and it FTKs you, or it does nothing and doesn't accomplish anything, even with, you know, a good hand. So there's that. Snake Eye, best deck in the game. Fire King, second best deck in the game, alongside the Snake Eye stuff. Not really going to explain that one. Flunder does have the ability to kind of turn off a bunch of different decks, but it also just dies to a bunch of different things as well. It's okay. It breaks, though. Super Heavy Samurai is fairly okay, but it's just a worse version of Math Mech at this point. It doesn't really have a great way of starting the game nearly as much, unless you're playing it with, like, the Adamant Spader stuff. But yeah, there's just significantly less starters in the deck now, which matters significantly. Centurion's pretty good. We'll put it in tier 3. I think it's fairly solid. I might even move it up to tier 2. But I won't. I think it's fairly solid. It's a nice splashable engine as well, which is pretty nice. But overall, the Centurion deck itself is not exceptional. It's very beatable. Right? Both going first and going second. Like, if you interrupt it once, they generally don't end on something that's unbeatable. And if you can play through the one Blazar, oftentimes that is enough as well. So if you either have enough interactions to just kind of stop that one thing from happening, or if you have the ability to push through with additional engine, you're pretty good. However, it can also just absolutely dumpster you. Makanko is a deck that I think is fairly solid in terms of, in a best of one ladder system, it's fairly solid. That being said, it's also gonna lose to pretty much everything as well, right? You kind of have to get a little bit lucky with it, which is why it's Rogue. Kashtira, look, I can't put this high. Reason being, Kashtira dies to itself more than it dies to pretty much anything else, and also, a lot more people are playing Nibiru, which really hurts the deck. So you kind of have to do the middle option, which is like go Arise Heart, and just kind of sit on a 3-mat Arise Heart, which then dies to also pretty much everything. So I really just don't see this accomplishing a whole lot. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Raid Raptor is basically not worth talking about. They're a big combo deck that dies to individual hand traps, or also can push through every single hand trap, and then on 2 towers, which no one cares about. The towers are good, don't get me wrong, but also that's it. That's like all they do. Sometimes they have the ability of doing a little bit more, but like they die so often to just themselves, to just not having the engine necessary to do their end board, and their end board is mediocre. So there you go. Plant Link is just susceptible to a lot of stuff nowadays, right? Nibiru, Droll, Fua, Maxi, etc. Very strong end board. That's it though. Rescue Ace is fairly solid still. Just being able to like set 4 is pretty good, and those set 4 cards are fairly strong, and being able to like have that recursion as well. Then on top of that, doing like Promethean and what have you stuff is fairly solid. Rank 3 Turbo, aka Goblins, are fine. I don't really have anything to say. They do stuff. Ancient Gear is not really worth playing because Tenpai exists, but okay. Fiendsmith is one of the best engines in the game. Arguably, it's I mean, it's up there with Snake Eye in terms of how good it is. So there you go. Sharks are basically the same thing as Goblins. They're rank 3 Turbo, baby. Gimmick Puppets are in FTK, and they're like a fairly good FTK. So I don't know, tier 3. They're fine in a best of 1. Dark Magician is so bad. Orchist is, I really want to put this in everything else, but I like the deck, so I really don't. But I guess the Fiendsmith stuff pulls it up a bit, but that's kind of it. It's mostly just the Fiendsmith stuff. Ice Barrier is fine. It's a nice Floodgate Turbo style deck. Voiceless Voice I'm going to put into tier 3. I think it's a fairly decent deck. That's it. Memento is a tier 1 deck. It's very strong. It's a very nice combo deck that can play through a myriad of different hand traps except for Maxi. Pretty much everything else, though, is like beatable, and the end board is very strong. Pendulum's pretty good for a Pendulum deck. That's it. Salad does have a pretty decent end board and can play through some hand traps, but it also really depends on like what they end up drawing. But it's also susceptible to things like Maxi and Fool Loss and what have you. So it's even susceptible to like Nib, which is again more and more common now. Tenpai is just one of the best decks in a best of 1 format, regardless whether you're playing this with a bajillion hand traps or with what I would suggest is the Sky Striker cards, just to draw more engine and to have like more just must answer cards. Yeah, it's like the best deck in the game, at least in regards to a best of 1. So there's that. Next up, we have Zodiac, which is just not good. It just doesn't do anything by itself. You can play like Zodiac Tri-Brigade, which is fairly decent, which I forgot Tri-Brigade on here. I don't know. Mostly you'd play like Tri-Brigade Sprite, but Tri-Brigade's like, I don't know, tier 3. Actually, Tri-Brigade would probably be Rogue if we're not playing it with Sprite, but if we're playing it with Sprite, obviously it's where Sprite is. So there you go. Okay, now we got to talk about the new decks that are coming. We're not talking about Materiactor because that's not a deck. That's not real. It can't hurt you. But we are going to talk about specifically Crystron, Ryuge, and Mimighoul, which are all announced for or to coming to Master Duel in June, which is pretty cool. In like tomorrow. So what we have is Crystron, which is a big combo deck that relies on the graveyard in order to get things done and searches a whole bunch of cards. Are you seeing the issues here? It dies to pretty much everything that all of the top decks are currently also doing, and therefore dies to the same problems, or like has the same problems, and dies to the same cards. That's what I was trying to say. That being said, the combo is pretty cool, and it does do some fairly strong stuff, but it's just like one of the worst versions of the combo decks. Maybe it'd be tier 3. I'd have to really see it in action, but like, sure, it's fairly decent in the TCG right now, but like, it really didn't do much in the OCG, and overall, I think Master Duel is just significantly stronger than a lot of these other formats, because they refuse to kill things, so there you go. Ryuge is like the definition of a rogue deck. It can do stuff, it has some different merits in it, and it can play a different package depending on, like, what you want to specifically get out of it. So there's like a bunch of different things that you can do, but none of them are that impactful. And then Mimighoul, yeah, Mimighoul's also rogue. Mimighoul kind of does stuff. It can do some things here or there, but also it also just like doesn't do stuff sometimes, and it also is very bad into Purge and Impulse, which is also very funny, because all of their monsters are Earth, so if the opponent impulses, which they can impulse the Mimighoul cards, it just immediately turns off the Mimighouls that you give them. Which is very funny, so now you just give them free guys, which is very hilarious. But yeah, overall, it is a fairly cool strategy, but I don't think it's going to do much, all things considered. So that's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy. If you did, thanks very much. We'll appreciate it. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye.